Gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. And in today's episode of the Gentleman Warrior podcast, we're going to talk about the reality, which is a very painful reality at times, of the marriage coming to an end and post divorce life. And mark my word, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not like the subject matter expert on how to handle this. Um, some people handled it their way, some other people handled it better. Um, Mine was very traumatic, but what I can share are some things that helped me get through it and some things that kept me sane throughout all of these things. Um, you see, I'm very old fashioned, gentlemen. I've always believed in marriage. I believe, even if it's statistically not things that last because of divorce nowadays, I've always had that idealism in me that it could work. And one thing, especially if you're invested into the marriage, and especially if there are kids involved, is a true gentleman will fight for, to the best of his ability to save the marriage. There could be a lot of reasons why it's on the rocks. Infidelity is a very popular one. Either one of you has an affair and it really just puts the marriage in a frying pan. Abuse is a big one. And abusive substances like drugs or gambling, these are all things that can destroy the marriage. But when my marriage started taking a downturn, I doubled my resolve because I said, if there's something in this world worth fighting for, it's the home, it's the family, and that the ultimate test of love is that you don't easily just give up. In America, getting divorces are easier than sometimes God knows what. It's easier than ordering a pizza at times. Here in the Philippines, it's a lot more difficult. But in spite of my best efforts, one of the things that gave me the peace of mind to admit that yes, now divorce is the option, is there was no more respect. There was love. And even up to this day, I'll go on record and say I still love my ex wife because she brought the two most beautiful things in my life to me, which is my children. And we were married for a long time. And in spite of our ups and downs, I still treat her like family, but there's no romantic love between me and her. There was love, but there was no respect. And because of that lack of respect, built more and more resentment. More and more, the resentment just kept on going up and up. And I said to myself, if I don't end this now, if we don't choose to part as friends and civilly and force ourselves to stay together, then knowing that there's no respect anymore and there was already a lot of resentment, then it would have eventually made us destroy one another, one day at a time. So, for the safety of my own children's mental health and my own as well, that was the option I decided to make. That I said I'll be the one to leave. And it was the most difficult decision in the world to do because, like I said in previous episodes of the podcast, I grew addicted to the home, to the household, to the home life, to the noise, to the children being there, to the dinners together, to the trips out of town, all of it. Even if me and my ex-wife had our ups and downs, but the first telltale sign really that it was time to let this go was the fact that there was no more respect. And when the respect was gone, when the resentment was there, it was no longer a safe space. And for you, brothers, your home needs to be your safe space. This is what you're fighting for. This is what you're providing for. This is what you're working for. This is what you're toiling for. And if you can't feel safe at home, then you're on the thinnest of ice. Because just one day, you're going to give up. Either you're going to get dependent on a substance, you're going to go in a self destructive pattern, or you might end up looking for the affection, the respect, and the recognition you need from other things, which could usually lead to an affair. Now, one bit I'm going to tell you, gentlemen, that if you feel that your marriage is already on the rocks and it's slowly tapering away, if you feel already emotionally checked out, you have to start building a support system. Because if you're already gone, when you make that leap from married man to single man, there will be a gigantic vacuum in your life. At first, it's going to be fun, right, guys? You're going to think, oh, wow, now I can date again. I can go on dating apps. I can go on Tinder and Bumble and get laid. Let me be the first to tell you that loses its luster very quickly. That is shallow ego food. Okay? And a gentleman will not be unfaithful to his wife most of the time, especially if you are the kind of person that values marriage. All right? If you're already being unfaithful, trust me, you're 2 steps out the door. I mean, if you're one of those people who do that, but you worked through it and you forgave one another, hey, you know what? More power to you. But if you're somebody who consistently does that and you're still married, that's a lot of bad juju coming your way. All right? And of course, people will say there are reasons, oh, my wife cheating as well, blah, 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 whatever. But a scenario like that is already just making the whole marriage a farce. But if you already think that you're outward bound, you need to build an ironclad support system, because there are going to be nights, brothers, you're going to be alone. And from somebody used to being married or used to having family around, especially kids, to you being alone in a room, that's when the dark thoughts enter your head. You're going to ask yourself questions like, what have I done? You're going to regret it at times, because after swiping 2 million times on Tinder and getting laid 300 times, you may just realize that you gave up something meaningful in some cases for something shallow. Or if it was a very abusive marriage you were in, there's still going to be a vacuum. And when that vacuum happens, that's where you need a support system. You need people that you can trust, who will not take advantage of you, who will understand that, yeah, at this time, Rob is going to be a bag of bricks. And I'm not going to judge him for it because he's at a low point. Now, anyone who rubs it in your face and you feel is taking pride or glee in seeing you like this, like they'll keep telling you nonsense like you haven't reached rock bottom. These are people who actually were never your friends to begin with. A true friend would say, hey, bro, I don't want to be the bad bearer of bad news, but there are going to be some humps here, but I want you to know that when it happens, you can call me. I'm here. I have this policy with my male friends now that, especially the ones who are married and with kids, that if ever they went single, dude, I'm going to camp out outside of his door, because having the rug pulled from under you and all of a sudden you find yourself living alone in an apartment after 15 years married, dude, it's a perfect storm, especially if the kids get taken away. Especially when the reality sinks in that you used to be with your kids 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, almost, and now you're seeing them once a week every two weeks. That in itself will cause a mental breakdown. If you can, I'd recommend adopt a pet. They really help, but make sure that pet is healthy, because if they're sickly, that'll only add to it. At the same time, if you're just getting out of a long-term marriage, I would be really careful about just jumping into another commitment. Some people have it lucky that the minute they get out of a marriage, they just meet someone, they're okay, and then they live happily ever after. Congratulations. You're the lucky ones. But if you just jump into another relationship like a month after getting divorced, it's not fair for the new person. But let's go back to the ending of the marriage. Towards the end of the marriage, there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings. There's going to be a lot of miscommunications. There's going to be a lot of arguments and fights. And I will be the first to tell you, brothers, under no circumstance, if there's a fight, if there's a misunderstanding, under no circumstance should you raise your hand and lay a finger on your soon to be ex wife. Because this is just for your protection, okay? I don't agree with hitting women, period, okay? But for your protection, brother, that is a silver bullet. And that is what will make you lose everything. That is what's going to get you painted as a wife beater, a inflictor of domestic violence, a monster. And if your marriage is dying, 90% of the time, your ex-wife will use that as to why it's dying. They will want to paint you at times as some abusive monster. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is, towards the end of the marriage, or basically under no circumstance ever, should you lay a hand on your partner. If they start getting violent, leave the house, leave the room, or get in the presence of another person, because there are some women out there who will claim that you hit them. So like, if your wife starts hitting you, run. Get in the presence of other people because you need witnesses, or turn on your camera and take photos of it, because that is a tactic some psychotic wives will do to get whatever they want after the marriage, from alimony to divorce settlement, because they'll say, if you don't agree with my story, if you don't give me what I want, I'll say you hit me. And that's going to put you in dire straits. A lot of you men, especially those abroad, are going to lose a lot because of the after divorce settlement. I'll be honest, it's really not fair for men. A lot of the time, women end up on top because they get alimony, they get living allowance, they get the kids, they get child support, and what are you left with? Half of nothing. And people wonder why men break down. You don't want to add to that with a domestic violence charge. You're better than that, because this is the Gentleman Warrior podcast. If need be, one of the safer things to do, be as close, if you have kids, be as close as you can to them, nearby, distance-wise. Even if there's, custody arrangements of how much time you get to see them, because if you're living in the same neighborhood, at least if something goes wrong, you're 5 minutes away. You're still the father. Nothing's going to take that away from you. If you've been doing your role as a father, if you've been doing your role as a provider, you can simply say, I'm exercising my right as a father if an emergency happens. But one mistake, not even a mistake, I didn't really have a choice, but in my case, I wish I could have moved in with somebody close to me, like a brother or even my parents if they were in the country, because it would have helped me process things better, because the isolation is ultimately what gets you, brothers. Now, the sad thing I realized too is there will be a lot more losses coming from the divorce than just the divorce. The divorce is what you're agreeing to. The end of the marriage is what you can already say, okay, I am choosing to end this. But if you have children, I implore you to be the better man and be as civil as you can be with their mother. Because when you and your wife go to war, your egos win, but your children suffer. I repeat, when you and your wife go to war, your egos win, but it's your children who suffer. But if your children know that, oh, you know what, even though they're not married, if this can be like, my dad is always there for my mom, they're still very close, you're giving them the best gift possible, knowing that their parents can still coexist to some degree. Now, sometimes it's just not possible. But remember, if you can, if it's within your power, don't make your children the casualty of this failed marriage, because it's going to mess with their heads. And I will be the first to tell you, if you are a gentleman and you have children, you are also beholden to be a father. And you must do what is best for your children, because they don't have a choice in the matter. So if that means not ruining your ex-wife's reputation, at least your children won't hold it against you. But of course, If your ex-wife is trying to destroy you and your reputation and your good name, you do have the right to defend yourself, to protect your good name. Because afterwards, there will be people who will ditch you. You will have casualties. And all of a sudden, you're going to realize that some of the relationships you thought you had weren't as real as you thought. I lost several good friends right after my divorce. I don't know why. That I thought were going to be there with me until the end of time. And it was after the divorce that I realized actually they were never my friends to begin with. And it broke my heart because it was the worst time possible for it to happen. So the next thing, once the divorce is done and once you're out living alone, yeah, you could go on dating apps if that's your jam. But the way I say it is like, if your ego needs that kind of food to just have like one night stands and stuff, well, now you're free to because you're divorced. But you are in no space most of the time to just jump into a full blown committed relationship because you just got out of a divorce. You just got out of a marriage. You just got out of a family life. So you're like flailing around looking for something to ground yourself to. And that is a dangerous start for any new relationship. The best thing you can do is look for the gaps in your schedule when you have empty time, because this is when the depression gets you. Planning out your day, filling in the void, is what is going to keep you going, because it's the time when you're alone doing nothing that the mind goes into dark places. Being with friends, meeting new people, learning new things, keeping yourself preoccupied. If you can afford it, enlist the help of a professional therapist. I'm very thankful for my therapist because she seems to remind me of my appointments with her when things start boiling over. And having that outsider's perspective does a lot of good in keeping me objective about my reality, especially when I divorced at the beginning of midlife, because she said midlife starts at 40. I divorced at 40 after 12 years married. So it was like, whoa. So putting it all together, your support system is what's going to help you get through this. Showing vulnerability to the right people is going to help you heal. Finding other men who were married, not are married. I mean, I like to say men who are married don't understand yet what you're going through. But those who were married, they get it. They understand it. You don't even need to explain it to them. They will be the ones who say, no, we need a drink. Or no, let's go work out. Or no, don't be alone. But the one thing I'm going to tell you all is do not, under any circumstance, take input from people who have never been married about this. Because their input, their advice is worth its weight in oxygen. In other words, it's nothing. A woman or a man who never had kids, who've always had everything handed to them, who has never had it taken away, has no right to tell you how to go through it. The therapist is there to help you with any psychological issues you're going through, like PTSD, depression, because they're trained to do that. But I would rather sit with my buddies Jerome and Kulas, who both came from this painful reality, than come from blind ideals. Well, you can just move on from some schmuck who never had kids. It's very insensitive. And those kind of people are going to get under your skin. I had a friend who I cut off. I think I said this in a previous episode, because he said to me, "Isn't that what you wanted?" I said, "Wow, you're really insensitive, aren't you, to say that? Who wants their family to end? So do you really want to be around people like that? Or somebody who will tell you, well, you're the one who wanted the divorce anyway." Would you believe it or not that sometimes men are pretty much given no choice? It's either their mental breakdown or staying married, or the divorce. Because I think that a true gentleman warrior would never want to leave his home. He would never want to abandon his castle and end a family, because that is the strongest thing in the world to work for. So when somebody tries gaslighting you into thinking that, well, you wanted to be single again, honestly, really? Does any good man really want that? Now, if you're a narcissistic or chauvinistic jerk, but a good man would never want to end his family. So if he's leaving, it only means one thing: he doesn't feel safe anymore. A true gentleman warrior will give his life, body, and soul for his home and his family. So if this gentleman warrior is opting to leave, it only means he doesn't feel like it's home anymore. And I will be the first to tell you, there will be dark moments. And when those moments come, even beforehand, because like sometimes the euphoria of getting divorced is exciting. Well, I get my own apartment again. I can travel. I'm in charge of my own money, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, that's going to run out within the first month. One of my best friends told me, Rob, whatever you do, don't go in the bottle, meaning don't drown your problems in alcohol. And I agree. I'm happy I never did that. Others might try to stop the pain by using drugs and stuff like that. Another thing that it's not going to solve your problems. So when you go into those holes, even beforehand, have 5 friends, 5 people that know your pain or who show you compassion, that you know you can call when you're really at your limit, and tell them, okay, this is what's going on. I don't want to do this, but this is a real stress test of a relationship. Can you be one of 5 people I can call when everything is falling apart? I'm not going to do it all the time. And don't abuse it either, because if you give too much power to those kind of people, they can actually become abusive. Anyone can. But if they understand that you're like a wounded animal and you're just asking them for a little bit of runway to get through this dark period of your life, true friends will understand that. They'll tell you when they're not capable of helping you, but they'll be there when you need them. And that could be the difference between life and death, brothers. I hope this really helps you all. I want you to know you're not alone. And like I said in the previous episodes, brothers, you matter.